Hi everyone. So I want to talk a little bit about the phenomenon known as the bystander effect. I'm not going to go into a lengthy history of this concept. I'm sure there's a lot of things that could be said about it in terms of its origins and so on. I believe actually, and this is very loosely speaking, it comes from a homicide in, I believe it was New York City in the 50s, whereby a young woman was killed, and a lot of people basically ignored her. I think that's actually the origins of the concept of the bystander effect, but I don't have the precise dates and names and all on hand. Um, Perhaps that could be for another video if I do follow up to this. Um, but basically, it's the idea that people don't want to get involved in trouble. They see a problem and they think, "That's not my business. I better not get involved." Um, I've a couple of personal anecdotes because it actually is something where it's one of those issues, that people think, oh, I wouldn't do that. Um, but the truth is, you don't know until you're in the situation. You just cannot be sure, even if in your gut you feel, yes, I would do the right thing, I would step up. It actually gets into some grey areas. Now, I'll explore that in a minute, but personal anecdote, and that actually happened yesterday, so it's very fresh. I'm not sure if this quite falls under the bystander effect in the sense that there was no real casualty as such. It wasn't like, a road accident or something like that. But it was a somewhat tense situation. I was at my local Iceland store, um, and basically a guy was caught with a bottle of wine. He was clearly stealing it. He had it in his pocket, and quite big guy, tall guy, quite well built. Obviously someone who could fight, I would imagine. Anyway, there was a tense situation. I was sort of waiting in the queue to pay for my goods, and I could see because it was like literally about a meter away from me. Um, well, actually, as I joined the queue, I could overhear this happening. There was a male assistant working there, and basically, I could see that they were arguing. He'd obviously caught him in the act of stealing this, and then he was sort of raising his voice, the shop assistant, and he said, "Are you threatening a member of staff, sir? Are you threatening?" And he was raising his voice because obviously what had happened was this guy was kind of squaring up to him, and apparently he'd actually said, "Let's take it outside." So he directly threatened the assistant, and you could tell the guy was, it was a tense situation, and he was sort of looking at the queue as if to say, there's witnesses here, and are you threatening a member of staff in front of all these people, kind of thing. And he said a few times, get security, get security. The guy was white guy, tall, well built. I guess East European just from the accent. But I have no intention of sort of saying he was definitely from this place or otherwise. But the point is, it was a tense situation, and I was sort of looking at this, and it was quite clear that the guy, was a thief. He had the thing in his pocket, and he looked shifty. Just his whole demeanor and his attitude was shifty. Anyway, in the end, it didn't really escalate. His friend pulled him away, but it was a situation that could definitely have turned to violence because both men were unhappy. The thief obviously didn't like being caught. Then he claimed that he wasn't going to leave because he'd done nothing wrong. So he was, being an ass about that. He wasn't going to leave. And he also had threatened this assistant. The assistant obviously didn't appreciate that. And, uh, I think he was trying his best to keep professional whilst obviously being angry about this man threatening him. But I was looking at this and I was literally a meter away. And honestly, I kept thinking, should I say something? Should I support the assistant here? Should I speak up and say something? Well, I didn't. What basically happened was a friend dragged the guy away, and it didn't really, nothing really further developed. But I did sort of discreetly say to the guy, he obviously went off a shift to calm down a bit. I noticed he was sort of stack his shelves also, and I sort of said to him, look, I saw all of that, so if it helps, I can hold back a bit. And he appreciated that, and he said, sure, mate, just I'll let you know. As it turned out, it didn't need that anyway. But basically, I was saying, look, I'm willing to say I saw what happened, and I saw that he was squaring up to you, and that he had threatened you. Well, it didn't come to that anyway. But the reason I mentioned the bystander effect is I went through my mind, well, should I speak up? And I must admit, I was a little bit anxious. I thought, well, guy is physically bigger than me. If it turned to it, what would happen? And I also sort of thought, well, if I intervene on behalf of the staff member, then he might have verbals with me. And unlike the staff member, I'd be leaving the premises, and then what's to say they wouldn't target me and attack me physically? But I must admit, I thought I did go in my head think, could I have done more? Should I have said something? Because I was very close to what had happened. I was about a meter away. The rest of the queue, they were kind of looking on and not really sure what to do. It was a scene. Um, there's one thing I'm very critical of myself in, which is any notion that I might be, if I have an opportunity to do something and I don't. But then again, had I sort of said something and said, "Oh, just leave" or something, do what the guy's asking you to do, it may have escalated it. It may have escalated it. Then he would have turned on me, and you know, I would have resented that, and I would have raised my voice, and then you have a situation with three guys involved, and maybe it wouldn't have helped anyone. Maybe it wouldn't have helped anyone. Then let's say he assaulted me, I'd have to hold back and do a police interview and all that sort of thing. So in the end, I sort of thought, well, I'll I'll just offer my support and say, look, I was a witness. I could say that I saw what happened. Incidentally, no one else did. They just got on with their business. Um, there was another occasion about quite a while back now, about 15 years ago. I saw some local kids, I mean young teenagers, and they were basically harassing um, a mentally challenged man. I don't know what precise condition the man had, but he clearly had a serious problem. And these little shits were harassing him. Sorry for the language, but that's how I felt about it. Mocking him and so on, and it really, you know, pissed me off. And I did confront them. Um, I yelled at them. I forget the precise words, but I think actually, often in these situations they just mouth back. But I think they were genuinely shocked, and hopefully they left the guy alone. But that was an instinctive thing. I was angry, and it just came out. I didn't even think about it. It was just like I can't remember exactly what I said, but I know my own record is I haven't always just looked on. I have sometimes intervened, but sometimes there's also this issue about the bystander effect. I think people can also be too cynical and too critical of others. So it's all very well to, look at a situation and say, oh, what's wrong with these people? They're selfish, they're not intervening. But there may well be times when intervening could A, make things worse, or B, um, lead those individuals to, you know, having their personal safety compromised. Now, I don't think anyone should be forced or pressured to risk their own personal safety. Possibly the only caveat is if a child is in mortal danger. But, expecting people to then put themselves in a potentially dangerous situation, I think is unreasonable. I do think, though, at the very least, people could, get on the phone and call the police or something, even if it doesn't involve direct communication with the assailant or the situation. Um, but I've seen situations. I remember I was once on Oxford Street in London, probably the busiest street in the United Kingdom, and a man had collapsed. He had some medical issue, and someone who happened to be walking by immediately sort of got down and started helping the guy. And I could see the person was panicking, like, is no one going to help me? Um, and I sort of looked back, and I then noticed a couple more people gathering around. I thought, well, is there anything I can really do? I've seen a few dramatic situations in my life, both here and abroad. In China, this has long been an alleged phenomenon, but it may well be to do with history because in a communist state, people are very much. It's a paradox because on one hand there is an intense nationalism there, whereby people will definitely tribalize and group together when it's perceived that China is being offended, and you get similar examples in other countries. Yet when it comes to sort of internal things, in the sense of it's it's not really bystander effect, it's something else, because I've been in a situation where there's been some sort of dispute between a vendor and someone buying something, and then everyone's crowded around just to have a nosy. In that sense, there is that phenomenon. People could be very nosy over there. It happens here as well, but particularly over there, I noticed it. It's not because they want to help, and it's not necessarily that they would have sympathies one way or the other, but that could be particularly testy if you're a foreigner and you get into a situation with a vendor. The locals will want to see what the Laowai, the foreigner, is saying, and it's that could definitely be an uncomfortable situation if you're in that, because it's not necessarily that people would be violent, but if you're an outsider, people are naturally prejudiced, or perhaps I shouldn't say naturally, but it's something that develops, it's something that happens. So this phenomenon of the bystander effect is also context to geography. In the United States, I heard a case of a young woman who was being assaulted on the New York subway by a black guy. Now, the question got raised because no one intervened. Well, I can see the dilemma there. Let's say there'd been a white guy or a Hispanic guy or an Asian guy that saw that. Now, men are always told you need to step up, you need to, not tolerate other men abusing women. But then in that situation, let's say it was a white guy and he intervenes, and the assailant is a black man. Well, then you can imagine what will happen. Oh, it's a racist thing, which of course it wouldn't be. It would be doing the decent thing and standing up to a criminal. Um, but unfortunately, the race issue is such a powder keg in America that people, I don't think they think objectively about it. People just assume that if there's a dispute between people of different ethnic groups, it must be a race thing. They don't consider, well, actually, it might just be um, that there's been an argument or there's been a misunderstanding or something. And it happens here as well. In London, I've seen that situation where the police are arresting. I don't want to go off on a tangent here, but the police are arresting a black suspect, and people crowd around and say, "Oh, it's racism, bruv, it's racism." And there is racism in the Met, but that doesn't mean that every single time a black person is arrested, that is the issue. And I think this is why I have a big problem with critical race theory. But you know what? I'm going off on a tangent away from the bystander effect. But it ties into it because why is it people wouldn't have intervened in that situation? White men would almost certainly have thought, yeah, if I intervene, I'll be accused of racism. And if I don't intervene, I'm a coward who's not standing up for a young woman. So it's kind of between a rock and a hard place. There's also a situation where men have intervened to help a woman, for example, with an abusive boyfriend. And then instead of sort of thanking him and saying that he's trying to help, the girlfriend or the wife will turn on the man who's intervening and tell him to mind his own business, almost like a Stockholm syndrome type thing, where they know they're being abused, but they'll still defend the husband or the boyfriend. In which case, the obvious question is, why the hell should guy bother to risk his own safety for someone who doesn't appreciate it, who isn't recognizing that he's trying to help? I had another situation, another anecdote here. A couple of years ago, I was walking past my local park. I was come back from the cinema, and I noticed there was a guy that was kind of literally upside down. His foot was caught on a fence. He was upside down. He looked like he'd been knocked out. Now he might have simply had too many drinks. Well, then a woman appeared, and she looked anxious, and she was sort of talking to him. I thought, well, it's a cold night. This was around November time. It's a cold night. He can't just stay out here all night. He'll get hypothermia or something, because he had a light top on. So I climbed over the fence and I sort of tried to like take his foot off it and see if he was all right. Well, he immediately turned on me. He grabbed my leg and he said, "Who the f are you?" And I was like, I was a little bit taken back, but I was in control because I was standing up. I said, buddy, I'm trying to help you. I'm trying to help you. I was trying to directly get him to see that point. And the woman, I don't know if she was a girlfriend or something, she said, yeah, the guy's trying to help. Well, it turned out that he'd been attacked because he'd been in some altercation with some other people. The police knew who this guy was. Apparently, he was a troublemaker and he'd been running his mouth, and that's basically what happened. But it's an example of, well, I didn't just walk by, so I don't mind admitting I'm proud of that. I didn't just walk by. But anyway, I'll wrap this up. But the thing about the bystander effect is context is very important. Now, that issue I mentioned in New York City with the black assailant, anyone of color who's watching this, I don't want you to get the wrong idea. And I'm not saying that only, it's only black guys who are involved in mugging. Of course, there's white guys and others as well. But I am saying, and this is a fact, in those situations, if a white person were to intervene, they're not going to be. Here's an interesting situation. What if you had a black woman who was being assaulted or mugged, and the assailant was a black guy, and a white guy or an Asian guy was to intervene? What would the race baiters say then? But these are the sort of questions that get thrown out there. So it's all very well to say, "Oh, people are cards; they just care about themselves and move on." But sometimes there's a reason for that. Sometimes it's because people don't want to be in the center of a misunderstanding. They don't want their own safety compromised. And I don't think that's selfish. I think it's a fundamental human right. Um, expecting a stranger to risk their own personal safety, I think that's unreasonable, unless it's a child. Unless it's a child. So let me know your thoughts regarding the bystander effect. Let me know if you've ever personally had an experience where you've been in this situation where you had to make a judgment call. Should I get involved or not? Personally, I'd like to say I'm the sort of person who would intervene, especially if it was a vulnerable person, a child, a woman, an older person, or a disabled man. You know, if I put it this way, if I saw a man being attacked by a gang, a single man, and he's being attacked by three other blokes, I I'd think, yeah, that's I need to do something. If it's two guys having a fight of a similar age, and they're just having a fight, I'm not going to get involved in that. I might kind of look and because it's something that's happening, and it's hard to sort of not look. But I wouldn't get involved in that situation because it's two guys having a fight. Um, okay, it's not good. It's not a good thing to see, but that is a much less poignant situation than if it's, say, a gang attacking a vulnerable person or anyone for that matter. Now, if it's that situation, I'm not going to play a superhero and swoop in and put my physical safety at risk, but I would like to think at the very, very least, I would, get on the phone and call the police and say, look, I'm seeing someone being attacked. Um, I I hope I'm not, someone who's a pushover, but I'm not going to pretend that I'm the bravest person in the world either. Because the thing about bravery, sometimes overt bravery can be recklessness. There is a fine line between the two. Anyway, I'm going to wrap this up, but let me know your thoughts. I think there's a lot of factors involved. I think there's context. I think there is situations that could be misunderstood. I think there is also doing the right thing. I will say, it's not just about excuses. There are times that people are just selfish and they won't do anything. There was yet another example. There's many anecdotes to use here. There was a young woman a few years ago who fell into a river in China and she was basically drowning. I think she'd hit her head or something. And who came to the rescue? A local British diplomat. This became quite a well-known incident. It was all over Chinese social media. Everyone said the guy was a hero. He didn't think so, and he was a middle-aged man. But he went in there. He basically rescued her, and then some of the other guys sort of helped him up, and they gave him a towel and stuff. But what Chinese netizens were saying is, why did none of us intervene? Why did it take a foreigner to do this? And they praised the guy. And the young woman, thankfully, she was okay. She invited him to dinner as a thank you. But yeah, bystander effect. Now, that may not be that people were being selfish. It may be that people genuinely couldn't swim. It may be as simple as that. So people shouldn't always assume the most cynical, like it's people being selfish or something like that. Sometimes it is. Some people really are quite self absorbed and they don't give a damn about other people's problems. to the point where they really, really will turn a blind eye to everything, even when there's no safety issues involved. Now, I don't think highly of that. However, we shouldn't judge situations where people may well have their own personal safety compromised. I think that's unreasonable to expect anyone to compromise their personal safety unless, like I say, a child is involved. Final anecdote, and this is a fictional one. Jurassic Park. Jurassic Park. If anyone's seen that movie or if they've read the book, there's a scene where the lawyer he sort of leaves the car where Lex and Tim, the two children, the grandchildren of Hammond, are in the vehicle, and the Tyrannosaurus Rex is coming up, and he runs away. Now in the film, it just shows he's a nervous wreck, but in the book, it explores that a little bit more, and it shows he has huge guilt because he basically left two children on their own with this ferocious dinosaur, on the prowl, and in the movie, he leaves the door wide open as well. Um, Now that's, not a very noble thing to do, to run away and leave two children on their own in that sense. Of course, he gets eaten in the next scene anyway, but let me know your thoughts about the bystander effect. But I think there's actually a lot of components involved, and I don't think it is as black and white as Courage and Cardis. I don't think it's that black and white. Let me know your thoughts.